set of challenges will come. We were invited and sponsored by a church in Midwest City, Oklahoma, um, and stayed there for 5 years till the next step, the calling to sort of continue to keep moving on. And so we moved down south to Texas, and I apologize. I wish I had maps to sort of go through this, but if you follow the story, and took another step of faith to help the startup of a new church. That's where I started middle school, and I remember, like I said earlier, I felt at a young age, I don't know when, I committed my life to God. It wasn't a radical sort of transformational thing. It was a almost step by step, everyday change in my life. And I remember middle school in Texas, one afternoon talking to my friend named Quaylen, and just sharing a Bible story that I learned growing up in Nigeria about the Bible. And Quaylen was kind of the kid that would get in trouble, start fights, and get suspended. But for some reason we connected, and just sort of what I would say is share the Bible with me. A few years later, after middle school, attended a high school for architecture. Junior year, was chosen to serve as the Fellowship of Christian Athlete president. If you guys are familiar with FCA, it's an organization that usually is different high schools throughout the U.S. Going back to Quaylen again, I had not seen him since middle school. That was a matter of 2 or 3 years. He'd gone somewhere else. The way God works, I think somehow or the other he came to know God, and he and I co-led this Fellowship of Christian Athlete group. Quaylen and I worked together. The summer before that started, my mom and I and my family joined together and prayed. The Christian group at the high school, we had a membership of almost 8 to 10 students. Almost weekly when we met on Tuesdays. In the senior year that Quaylen and I led the organization, we moved up to 70 plus students coming every Tuesday. I felt that was the prayer that was laid out before that summer, encouraging students, inviting students to consider faith and to consider God, and preparing for that. So I graduated in 2001 from high school, and made the decision to join the Marine Corps. I thought the opportunity to join the Marine Corps would prepare me for and discipline me for a life of a design school student. And still, I think today, being a student in college is probably much more challenging than being in the Marine Corps. So after I finished the first year in the Marine Corps, the year I was sort of released to reserve duty, where I started at the University of Texas, Arlington. There I again found community, the idea of self, others, and action. Where is your community? Who are you for? Who are you in relationship with? I joined the Grace Community Church. At Grace Community Church, I became that planted the seeds for where I am now in thinking about international ministry. We had events such as the Big Howdy, where we welcome, it's a Texas thing, welcome international students from all over the world. Every semester, there was Friday night Cornerstone House, and just a way to sort of build relationship with people, because it's through relationship that I feel that we can get to know God more in relationship with others. And at Grace Community Church, I started to understand that missions does not always have to be abroad, and it can also be where you are right now, in your lab, with your friendships, with your families. Mission in the sense of encouraging people, and as a Christian in the faith. I learned also how to show God's love in practical ways. Sometimes as simple as opening the door for people when you walk by them, or just smiling, or being kind, or finding a way to serve someone. And this is where a lot of the seeds were planted for me during the undergraduate year in Texas. And how to point people to Jesus. I remember my pastor at Grace Community Church always says, one of the things is not to draw attention to ourselves, but to make Jesus essentially point people to Jesus. So that was really important for me. Um, During my college years, just a sophomore year, as you saw in the video, I was deployed. The lessons I wanted to share from that time it was more about character building. I wasn't thinking about if I would be killed or died. I trusted my life to God. The most difficult part was dealing with people, as you may face at work or may face wherever you are, and taking orders from and accountability issues. Those things were challenging for me. I was able to read The Purpose-Driven Life during those 7 months in theater in Iraq, and I remember one part of it where it says, life is a test, life is a trust, and life is a temporary assignment, if you've read Rick Warren. And so we're all going to face different tests in life. We're all going to have to trust something. If we don't trust God, we trust ourselves. And as a Christian, we believe life is a temporary assignment. This where we are now is not our home, and there's an eternal glory, if you will. And in that time, one of the most memorable thing was, again, someone from Grace Community Church, my church in college, sent a CD of one of the pastors preaching, and this verse struck me very much from Philippians 2, 3, 4, it may not be there, which it says, okay. There it is. In humility, consider others better than yourselves. And I want to make that more practical. I remember Pastor Jamie saying that before you pick up the phone and talk to your friends or talk to family or anybody, you just say, Lord, not expecting what they're going to say to you that's going to upset you or that's going to whatever. Just be able to say, Lord, I'm just going to give this up to you, or consider whatever they say, whatever they do more important than mine. So I began to take that idea and use that in my relationship with others. Sort of putting the bigger picture first in dealing with people. There in Iraq, I got to connect with the Iraqi soldiers. Didn't know a lot of Arabic, but were able to connect, and they asked questions about my faith and America, and also the fellow Marines. We had church in a train we called the Soul Train. It was an old Iraqi train that was no longer in use, and we used that for our chaplain. I started to understand different faith traditions. I had to attend mass because sometimes that's all that was there. I had a great chaplain, Chaplain Bennett, that really drew us closer to God. But even in the midst of war, I want to say that even in the midst of difficulty, people can still push God away. They can still be distracted by different things. They try to encourage a lot of guys to come to chapel or mass, and they would be playing video games that families and friends had sent, or they would want to do something else in their free time, which was interesting to see. By God's grace, we returned back to the United States around Easter 2005. All of us came back, but one, Lance Corporal Qualls, lost his life in Fallujah. But that was it was a blessing that we could bring everybody back out of the 50 that came from Texas that were attached to the unit in California. I returned back, by God's grace, completed the last 2 years of architecture school. I then graduated in 2007, received many opportunities to study in, 3 schools in the Midwest. I chose the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. I felt I didn't choose that. Again, I feel a lot of my life, a lot of what happens to us is not by accident. There's a reason, and I felt led to go there, where I was, again, connected to community, to church. At this time, my faith was tested and challenged much more than before. It's a new spiritual environment there in the Midwest. But I felt that God, and I'm saying this to myself, I'm saying this to you, that God is always at work in our lives. And that's the next verse here, is that the work of God in our lives is not finished yet. So wherever you are in your life, and God is still at work. The reason that we're not perfect, the reason that there's always challenges and trouble, because God is still at work in our lives. And I also learned at that time not to be anxious. And during trials and difficulties and situations, I also learned that I had to put my trust in God and in my faith in Christ Jesus. My time is running out, so I'm going to fast forward here. In Milwaukee, I got an opportunity to mentor high school students using my field of architecture, and and then the advisor encouraged me to apply for ed school,